And now, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a leading voice in the educational leadership and innovation, currently serving as a senior lecturer on education at Harvard University. Please welcome Dr. Elizabeth City.
Alaikum. I'm a teacher, and one thing I know is that you have been sitting for a while, which is going to make it very hard for you to learn anything from me. So my first request is that you stand up, introduce yourself to two people around you, and say hello for a minute, and then I'll get into my talk. Okay. Okay. There we go. That's better. We're here for an educational summit, right? The whole point is to connect and learn with each other. So thank you. Thank you for that. One thing we know about the brain and how the brain learns is that movement helps the brain. And I think sometimes we forget that when we are in schools with children, but also with adult learning. We sometimes think adults can sit for a long time. All right, so thank you. Let's see here. Click. It is? Oh, there you go. Thank you. All right. Right there in the middle. Okay. I'm going to talk for 15 to 20 minutes, but you're going to have to do some work too, because that's also how the brain learns, is by you making some meaning as we go. But first, I'll talk for a little bit. I'm going to share some of my latest work, and it's about leading strategically. So by the end of this talk, I am hoping that you know 5 elements to leading strategically and that you've self-assessed your own leadership. And this is really designed for any leader, whether you're a teacher leading from the classroom level, you're leading a school, you're leading outside a school, maybe you're a leader even outside of education and you're in this room. So I told you I was a teacher, so we have a little agenda. I'm going to give you an overview of these 5 elements of leading strategically, and then it's going to be your turn to do a little self-assessment, and then I'll wrap up with a couple thoughts. So this work comes from working in education a long time, over 30 years now, and looking at places where educators struggle. So I'm wondering if any of these things sound familiar to you. One is having a really long list of things to do and not quite enough time to do them in. Anybody have that? Yes, right? Confusing the means and the end. Sometimes I've done a lot of work on using data to improve learning. And oftentimes people get really excited about using data. And they get so excited about using data, they forget why we're using data, which is to improve learning. Another thing we often do is focus on the technical and structural things, assuming that's going to fix everything. And as our previous speaker was just talking about, we lose sight of some of the more complex human-centered parts, especially when it comes to change. You can't just tell educators in a school, well, the research says this, so do it. That's not how humans work, right? We can't motivate change that way. Another thing we often do in education is we spend a lot of time trying to design a strategy, design what the work is going to look like, and we forget to involve the people closest to doing the work. So in schools, oftentimes that looks like telling teachers what they're supposed to do without engaging the teachers in how to get there. Another thing we often do is we work without thinking about what has come before us and what context are we in now. So yesterday I was leading a workshop at the summit here, and somebody was talking about math curriculum and introducing a new math curriculum into their school. And you could do that, but if you don't think about what happened the last time we introduced a new curriculum in this school, how did that go and what did we learn from it? And then what right now are our resources? Then you're going to run into trouble. And then the last thing is the human part. What do people need in order to feel safe and a sense of belonging so that they can do their very best work? All right. So I was thinking about all these challenges and I thought, well, how can we help people develop their own and others' capacities to address these challenges, to lead with intentionality in education? And my colleague Rachel Curtis and I came up with these 5 elements of leading strategically. And as I said before, they're applicable no matter whether you kind of think of yourself as a leader or that's something you're growing into. We think about these as things you can develop in yourself and others. So I'm going to use a flower as a metaphor for the growing. So here's leading strategically at the center. And here are the 5 elements: discern, cultivate relationships, understand context and history, harness power, and think big, act small, learn fast. I'll go through each of them quickly, but pay attention because I'm going to ask you to self-assess on these things. So be listening and thinking, which of these am I already really good at? And which of these maybe are more growing edges for me? Okay, so the first one, we start with discern because everything else flows from this. Discern is about 3 big things. It's about identifying purpose. Why are we even doing this work? What are we trying to accomplish? The second piece is understanding what problems do we need to solve in order to achieve that purpose, and what are the root causes of those problems? How do we get deeply into those roots and understand what's keeping us from achieving that big why? And then the last piece is once you've done those 2 things, you got to figure out what to do. You have to choose what might be the right action to take in this moment. And a lot of discern is about kind of going slow to go fast, slowing yourself down so that you don't feel like you have to react to everything that's coming at you, but you act with intentionality. So that's discern. The second one, cultivate relationships. The first part of it is just what you would think. It's about cultivating relationships between people. It's about acknowledging people's humanity, greeting them, knowing their names, all of those small things, but also getting to know people through the work. The second piece is often something we don't do as well in organizations, and that's build relationships across bodies of work, departments, and organizations. Often organizations, schools, school systems, there's a team doing this over here, there's another team over here doing that, and there's another team over there doing that. How do we help build relationships across the work we do? The third element, understand context and history, is, a little too fast there, is just what I was saying about that math curriculum example. How do we plan what we're doing now, being mindful both of the current context we're in, what are our resources, what are the politics, what's going on all around us, and also what has come before us. Oftentimes when we get an idea we think is great, like even AI, as our previous speaker was talking about, AI, yes, okay, well, what happened the last time we introduced technology here? What are our resources we have right now that we could capitalize on? The fourth one, harness power. First of all, you have to be able to see power. Many years ago when I was a teacher and then when I was a school leader, I kind of didn't want to talk about power. I thought, well, power is for people who aren't focused on kids. I'm focused on children. Power is for people who aren't really focused on that. But as I've come to understand, leading in many different contexts, you actually can't get anything done without power, right? And so if you really want to accomplish ambitious, audacious things, you have to figure out how to harness power. And when I talk about power, I'm talking about 2 different kinds. One is positional power, which is what do you get from being in a particular role, formal authority. Like when I was a school principal, I had a different authority than I had as a teacher. As a Harvard faculty member, I have a different authority than I had when I was a school principal, right? They each have different roles. The other kind of power is personal power. What do I have just from the relationships I have, the resources I have, the experiences I have? You see this in organizations when there's the person who knows exactly what happened in that meeting, even though she wasn't in the meeting. You know that's a personal kind of power that people have, right? And then the last piece is think big, act small, learn fast. The idea here is first, come on, clicker, there we go. The first is to anchor in purpose. That's the think big. What's the big thing we're trying to accomplish? The second part of that is to make small bets, which does not mean we're gambling. What it means is we are operating within uncertainty and we're deciding where to focus. What are going to be our focal points? And they're going to be small. In a school, they're going to be things we can do in 2 to 4 weeks, right? So how do we decide little things that are connected to the big things so we don't get overwhelmed? Sometimes schools try to think big, act big. But act big is overwhelming and doesn't usually make the progress you want. And the last piece to this is to learn and adapt. How do we very quickly learn as we go? So oftentimes in schools and school systems, we kind of act in straight lines. We're going to try something else, try something else. But the idea of think big, act small, learn fast is, why don't we try something, learn something, and that's going to bend that improvement arrow back on itself because we're going to use what we learned to try the next thing. All right, that was your quick tour. 5 elements of leading strategically. All right, now it's your turn. I think most of you have a notebook with a pen. If you do, I would love for you to pull that out and draw for a moment with me. If you don't, you're going to just kind of do it in your head, all right? So what I'd like you to do is draw your own version of this flower. You're going to do 2 versions. The first is, when you think about your own leadership, which of these do you feel most confident and skillful about, right? And the bigger the petal, the more confident and skillful you feel. So here's mine. I'm very confident about think big, act small, learn fast. I'm doing improvement work for over 20 years. I feel like I'm good at that. I'm good in anchoring in purpose, figuring out small steps to take, learning really quickly. I already told you, power. I've gotten better at it, but it's still kind of a growing edge for me as a leader. So mine's smaller there. And then the other ones, I feel like I'm okay at those. Depends on the day, but I'm okay at those. All right, so I'm going to give you a moment to draw your own flower, all right? On the paper if you have it. If not, do it in your head. That's step 1. All right, step 2 is now think about a body of work that you're either leading or you have some role in. And I want you to now draw the flower with the petals the size of what's operating in that work. So as our previous speaker mentioned, in the United States, where I'm from, we have a new president, and a lot of things are shifting very quickly in our context, including in education. I run an initiative at Harvard called Reach Every Reader that's about early literacy. And some of our research is funded by the federal government. But the federal government right now is cutting a lot of research contracts. And so the context and history is very important to be paying attention to right now, as is how power is flowing, as is how are the relationships that we've established in doing this work going to sustain the work possibly in a different way. So my think big, act small, learn fast isn't helping me as much right now as paying attention to some of these other things when I try to think about how are we going to keep doing our literacy work in a different context. Okay, so you think about a body of work that you are leading or have some role in right now in your context and kind of redraw. And then what you're going to do is you're going to kind of compare those two. So my 2 are up here, and you can see, oh, the things I think I'm really good at, those might not be the things I most need to be doing right now, right? I have to really focus on some of the other elements of leading strategically. So I'm going to invite you now to perhaps talk to those people you just met at the beginning for a moment or 2 and just share a little bit. I'm going to cut you off before you're done probably, but just share for a little bit. What did you draw? Or if you didn't have a place to draw, what do you think a big strength of yours is? And is that serving you right now, or do you need to be focusing on something else? Okay, go ahead and talk for a minute or 2 together. All right. Just the beginning of the conversation. You can continue afterwards. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up because I know you have a lot of other people to learn with and from today. So here are the 5 elements again. And I find in my own practice sometimes when I'm trying to figure out how to operate, even in a day, we design these. I've done a lot of work on strategy, and strategies are really important. Like I know the SCA just has been doing a lot of work thinking about what's our strategy. Really important to figure that out. And as leaders, every day we make so many decisions about what to do and not to do. And so these are designed to help you each day also figure out, how can I operate with more intentionality towards my purpose? So here's the 5 elements. One of the things that's really important for a leader is to ask a lot of questions. And so I'm going to show you 8 questions. This is the last thing I'm going to leave you with. 8 questions that I ask a lot and teach other leaders to ask, and have learned from other leaders that they ask. And I think if you ask these 8 questions, you will be a more effective leader. So here's the first one. What is your ambition for this work? What are you trying to do here? The second one, what's the problem you're trying to solve? We often take action without being clear on what problem we're trying to solve. The third one, who cares about this work and why? That'll start helping you map relationships and power. The fourth one, what will success look like? Right? What's our vision for when this goes incredibly well? What would it look like? Very important for making change. What will you focus on to make progress? How are you going to get there? The sixth one, how do current conditions and past successes and failures inform this work? How do we learn from what's come before us? The seventh one, what are the trade-offs? All leadership is about trade-offs, and so trying to make them explicit. And then the final one, how will you measure progress and learn from your efforts? All right, so you don't have to try to ask all 8. Just pick one. And if you ask that regularly, it's going to help you be more strategic. I have a longer version of this. I have a new book coming out about this later this spring. It'll be out in late April, early May from Harvard Education Press. That little QR code will take you to that, and there's a little discount. And then this QR code is just if you're interested in this topic and want to stay connected, it'll just take you to a little form that'll invite you to stay connected in a community of educators who want to learn and lead strategically. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful summit.